Here's a paradox. During the darkest 6 months of David Bowie's life, one of his brightest masterpieces was born. Winter of 1975 to 1976, Los Angeles. Bowie was using so much cocaine that his body was literally collapsing. He'd dropped to around 95 pounds, going days in the same clothes, terrified of mirrors, talking about imaginary enemies. But at the same time, he was creating station to station, stunning arrangements, brilliant lyrics, some of the most iconic songs in rock history. And here's the most chilling detail. Years later, Bowie would say, "I don't remember how I made that album. It's like someone else made it." How could this be? How could a person lose their memory while creating a masterpiece? Studio recordings, witness testimonies, and Bowie's own journals tell us the real story of those 6 months. And this story shows just how thin the line is between genius and madness. But warning, this story is disturbing, because sometimes art costs the artist their life. If you want to hear this incredible story all the way through, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button to support us. When David Bowie returned to Los Angeles in September 1975, his friends didn't recognize him. At 5'10", he weighed only 95 pounds. His cheeks were sunken, dark circles under his eyes, his skin nearly translucent. Cocaine had become Bowie's lifestyle itself. He was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a day, spending the rest of the time either doing cocaine or chasing paranoid thoughts. Guitarist Carlos Alomar described those days like this: "When you looked at David, you couldn't be sure if he was really there. His eyes saw you but didn't see you, like half his soul was somewhere else." By the end of September, Bowie made a decision. He was going to make a new album. What was taking shape in his mind was a transformation, a ritual, maybe a form of self-destruction. He rented Cherokee Studios and gathered his team: producer Harry Maslin, guitarist Carlos Alomar, bassist George Murray, drummer Dennis Davis. At the first meeting, Bowie tried to explain the concept to them. His words were jumbled. He couldn't finish sentences, but the fire in his eyes convinced everyone. Cherokee Studios was a small but prestigious studio on Fairfax Avenue. The first recording session started on October 8, 1975. Bowie arrived at 6 p.m. and stayed until 10 a.m. the next morning. This rhythm would continue for 6 months. Sound engineer Keith Harwood wrote in his journal, "The first thing David did when he came to the studio was prepare cocaine. Sometimes he'd just do cocaine for hours without speaking, staring at his notes. Then suddenly he'd run to the microphone and record a perfect vocal in one take, then sit back down and disappear." The crew was trying to adapt to Bowie's working method. Bowie's method kept changing. Carlos Alomar remembered, David was a perfectionist, but this time he was completely out of control. One minute he was laughing, the next he was screaming or crying. Emotionally he was all over the place, but musically he was still devastatingly sharp and focused. In mid-October, Bowie asked them to remove all the mirrors in the studio. "I see things in mirrors," he said. Everyone thought it was a joke, but Bowie was serious. He was afraid of mirrors. Then he started drawing Kabbalistic symbols and occult figures on the walls of his house. One day, he brought a note with some of these symbols on it. When Harry Maslin asked about them, Bowie said, "I need protection. Dark forces are following me." Cocaine wasn't just destroying him physically, it had disconnected his mind from reality. In November, Bowie started coming to the studio as someone different. He no longer introduced himself as David Bowie, but as the Thin White Duke. This new persona was Bowie's darkest character: cold, distant, emotionless. Bowie described him as a psychopathic aristocrat. George Murray remembered, "When David went into the Duke character, he became someone else. His voice was deeper, more authoritative, and he wasn't coming out of character anymore because he couldn't." By late November, recording of the song Station to Station began. Over 10 minutes long, epic, mesmerizing. Bowie had spent days writing this song, but now he didn't remember those days. The lyrics were full of Kabbalistic references. Keith Harwood was shocked watching the vocal recordings. David sang the song almost in one take. When he finished, he came out of the booth, collapsed in a chair, and started crying. When we asked why he was crying, he didn't answer. December was the darkest period of the station-to-station recordings. Bowie's condition was rapidly deteriorating. He'd wear the same clothes for days, sometimes eating only milk and peppers. His weight dropped to 94 pounds. Doctors warned him, but Bowie didn't listen. His priority was finishing the album. The peak of paranoia came in mid-December. Bowie came to the studio one day and told them there was someone in his house, someone invisible, watching him, threatening him. He didn't want to go home that night. He slept at the studio. Throughout the night they could hear him, moaning, screaming. Dennis Davis remembered that morning. David's eyes were bloodshot. "I'm not okay, Dennis, but I don't have to be okay. I just need to finish," he said. During this period, Bowie's interest in the occult and Kabbalah peaked. He was bringing Aleister Crowley's books to the studio, covering walls with symbols. "Music is magic, and magic is dangerous. If we don't do the right protections, what we create will consume us," he said. The crew started noticing other disturbing patterns. Bowie would sometimes stand motionless for minutes, staring at nothing. He claimed he could hear voices through the walls, voices speaking in languages he didn't understand. At one point, he insisted the studio be cleansed with salt and insisted everyone enter through a specific door because the other entrance was contaminated. These weren't artistic affectations anymore. This was genuine psychological breakdown happening in real time, documented by everyone present. By January, Station to Station was almost complete, but Bowie didn't want it to end because he didn't know what he'd do when it finished. Carlos Alomar recalled, "In the final weeks, David wasn't finishing the album, he was prolonging it, listening to the same tracks over and over, making unnecessary changes." January 20th, 1976, was the final recording session. Bowie came in calm, talked with each crew member individually, hugged them. Then he listened to the album from start to finish. When it ended, he said, "Okay, it's done," and left. That night, he collapsed at home. The next day, he was hospitalized. Dehydration, malnutrition, excessive cocaine use. Doctors gave him a firm warning. If he didn't stop, he'd be dead within months. Bowie spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Station to Station was released on January 23, while Bowie was still in the hospital. The album was an immediate success. Critics called it genius, revolutionary, but no one was more shocked than Bowie. After leaving the hospital, he listened to the album again and was stunned. He didn't remember most of it. Carlos Alomar remembered that moment. "I'll never forget the look on David's face. When he heard some songs, he'd ask, 'Did I write this?' He genuinely didn't remember." Doctors explained. Long-term cocaine use, sleep deprivation, and stress had damaged his brain. Those 6 months hadn't been recorded in Bowie's brain. When Bowie heard this explanation, he reportedly cried silently. What he'd lost wasn't just memories, it was the creative process of his career's most important work. In March, the Station to Station tour began. Bowie still hadn't fully recovered, thin, exhausted, still addicted to cocaine. The first concerts were rough. He was forgetting lyrics, stumbling, but he stubbornly continued. The strange thing was, when singing Station to Station songs, it felt like he was hearing them for the first time, because he was. Those songs were written by a different David Bowie. During the tour, Bowie's stage costume had also changed. Instead of glam rock's glittery outfits, he now wore minimalist black and white suits. The thin white Duke character created a cold and distant image, not just musically, but visually. Rolling Stone wrote about the tour, "When Bowie takes the stage, it's like seeing a ghost, physically there but spiritually somewhere else." This observation wasn't just a critic's commentary, it genuinely reflected Bowie's disconnection during that period. In April, Bowie decided to quit cocaine. He tried on his own, at home facing the pain. The first days were hell. He was shaking, hallucinating. 2 weeks later, Bowie woke up for the first time in 6 months without cocaine. That morning he did something. He looked in the mirror. He finally looked in the mirror he'd been avoiding for 6 months. What he saw shook him. In the mirror was a stranger, thin, pale, sick, but alive. In May, Bowie gave his first extended interview. "I don't remember the album. I remember the music because I listened to it, but I don't remember making it. It's like it was someone else's album." The interviewer was surprised. but this is one of your best albums." Bowie smiled sadly. "Maybe that's why it's the best. Maybe the person who made that album was my darkest version, and I don't want to meet that version." This interview created a huge echo in the music press. Melody Maker ran a cover story. Bowie doesn't remember his own album. Some critics thought it was a marketing tactic, but those who knew Bowie closely knew he was serious. Producer Harry Maslin confirmed in an interview, "David genuinely doesn't remember. When we talk to him about the recording sessions, he looks puzzled, like he's listening to someone else's story." At the end of May, Bowie made a decision. He was leaving Los Angeles. He was moving to Berlin. On May 2nd, 1976, at Victoria Station, while waving to the crowd from the back of an open Mercedes, photographers captured a moment. The next day, newspapers exploded. Bowie gives Nazi salute. His career faced the threat of collapse. What really happened? Bowie was just waving, but photographers had captured a moment that looked like a Nazi salute. Bowie immediately issued a statement. "I have never, under any circumstances, supported Nazi ideology. I was just waving." This is a complete misunderstanding. But the damage was done. Concerts were cancelled. Radio stations banned his songs. The station-to-station period was his darkest time in every way. In the summer of 1976, when Bowie looked back, he began to see what those 6 months had really cost him. The physical damage was obvious. Extreme weight loss, heart problems, weakened immune system. But the mental damage went deeper. The memory loss wasn't limited to just the station-to-station recordings. Bowie couldn't remember most of 1975-1976. Medical literature documents that long-term cocaine use can disrupt memory formation, especially when combined with high stress and sleep deprivation, potentially causing severe amnesia. There were emotional losses too. Bowie's behavior during that period had damaged some close relationships. Paranoid thoughts, angry outbursts, and distrust had created wounds that couldn't be healed even years later. What made the situation even more tragic was that Bowie couldn't even remember the incidents that had driven people away. Friends would later describe moments of confrontation, accusations, and bizarre behavior, none of which Bowie could recall. It was as if someone else had lived those 6 months in his body, destroying relationships and leaving Bowie to deal with the aftermath without any memory of what actually happened. In the 1980s, Bowie was a superstar, but station to station was always there, like a ghost. In every interview he was asked, "Do you remember that period?" Bowie always gave the same answer, "No." In 1987, he said, "People think I'm lying, but I don't remember those 6 months. Sometimes fragments come in my dreams, but I don't know if they're real memories or imagination." In the 1990s, Bowie started making peace with this period. In 1997, he said, "This album might be my most honest work, because when I was making it, I wasn't thinking, I was just doing it. Maybe that's how art should be, without thinking, just feeling. That guy, that lost version of me, accomplished that." In 1999, he was asked, "Do you wish you could remember those 6 months?" Bowie thought for a long time. "I don't know. Sometimes I wish I could remember, but then I think maybe it's better I don't. Maybe those memories are too painful. Maybe my brain is protecting me. That guy couldn't survive. If he'd continued, I wouldn't be here now." In the summer of 2015, Bowie was diagnosed with liver cancer, terminal. He had 18 months to live. Bowie's first reaction, he had to make one last album, but this time it would be different. This time he'd remember everything. Black Star recordings began. Tony Visconti remembered, "David wanted everything documented. I won't forget this time," he said. During the Black Star recording, Tony Visconti observed that Bowie was at peace with that period. Bowie now saw Station to Station not as a loss but as a legacy. The producer would later recall, "David was in complete control on the last album. He was consciously choosing every note, every word. It was the complete opposite of Station to Station." On January 8, 2016, Black Star was released, Bowie's 69th birthday. 2 days later, Bowie died. The world was shocked. But then they understood. Bowie had planned his death. The lyrics to Lazarus, "Look up here, I'm in heaven," wasn't just a song, it was a real farewell message. Bowie had consciously prepared his final album, the complete opposite of how Station to Station was made unconsciously. Station to Station and Black Star were the two endpoints of Bowie's career. One was the product of chaos, the other of control. One forgotten, the other planned. Bowie was unconsciously dying while making Station to Station, consciously saying goodbye while making Black Star. And maybe these two albums show us the deepest truth. Art sometimes costs us our lives, but at the same time it makes us immortal. Today, Station to Station is still listened to as a mysterious album. Fans analyze the songs, trying to understand those lost 6 months. But maybe we shouldn't understand. Maybe Station to Station's power is exactly this: a work that's forgotten, lost but felt. Music historians analyzing the album say that Bowie's memory loss increased the album's mystique, turning it into an almost mythological work. The story of Station to Station isn't just an album story. It's the story of an artist dancing with death, losing himself, and still creating a masterpiece. Bowie lost his memory and health during those 6 months, but what he left behind was eternal. And a question: how can a person forget what they created? Neuroscience offers partial answers to this question. Under intense trauma, drug use and chronic stress, the brain can activate protective mechanisms, memory consolidation. The conversion of short-term memory to long-term memory can be disrupted. In Bowie's case, 6 months of intense creative process occurred simultaneously with physical and psychological collapse. The brain chose survival and sacrificed memories. When David Bowie died in 2016, the world lost a legend. Station to Station remains his most paradoxical work, the album Bowie doesn't remember, but music history will never forget. A masterpiece that doesn't exist in its creator's memory, but lives forever in collective memory. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and share this video. Write to us in the comments: have you listened to Station, and do you think an artist forgetting their own work is tragic or a kind of freedom? Music remembers forever, and maybe that's enough.